So what do we learn this week about mono white devotion in Modern? And I have to say, the deck was more impressive than I thought it would be. Looking at it on paper, I was a little skeptical. It's got a lot of cool stuff going on, but I wasn't sure if the plan would actually work. So there's good and bad, though. So let's talk about the good of the deck first. So the good is the plan of using border posts as enter the battlefield tap lands that generate white mana symbols for Nykthos was actually really sweet. It allowed us to make a ton of mana really early in the game. We had draws with like double border post into Knight of the White Orchid into turn 3 Elspeth or turn 3 whatever big thing we have in our deck, and those draws are really insane. So we actually can make a lot of mana, and that's not even including the possibility of having free white mana symbols on the battlefield with Leyline. So that part of the deck was really impressive. We made a lot of mana. My question with the border post was, are they worth the risk? So obviously, the risk of border posts is they're lands that do good things for Nykthos, but also die to artifact removal. So everyone plays Stony Silence, super popular sideboard card, and the most impressive thing about the border post plan is we actually were able to win through Stony Silence. So a turn 2 Stony Silence with some hands is really bad for us. However, once we get to turn 4, turn 5, turn 6, into the late game, it doesn't really matter that much because hopefully by then we have a Nykthos, and even if we can't use our border posts for mana by tapping them, they're still generating mana for Nykthos, so it's kind of okay. On the other hand, we didn't run into the nightmare scenario of like turn 1 border post, turn 2 border post, on turn 3 our opponent goes Grudge, Ancient Grudge, flashback Ancient Grudge, essentially Armageddon's us, so the risk is still there, but the fact that we can actually function through a Stony Silence made me a lot more comfortable with the deck. The other good of the deck is Thalia's Lancers gives us a really powerful package to be able to tutor up whatever we need in pretty much any situation, especially once we have all the mana going. If we need something cheap, we get Brimaz. If we're behind, we can get some life gain in Lavala or Gisela. If things are going well and we need to close out the game, we can get Bruna for the meld combo, Elish Norn to deal with creatures. Ulamog was a little bit questionable, even with all the mana we could make. There wasn't many times when we could actually cast an Ulamog, and maybe the most surprising card in the deck to me was Sky Sovereign. There were definitely situations where tutoring up Sky Sovereign was super good, being able to take down a Karn that ticked down against Tron, take out a creature, and then we have this huge attacker that keeps shooting things down, so Sky Sovereign actually kept us in a lot of games, so I was impressed by that. And like I said before, our setup really does maximize Nykthos and allows us to make a ton of mana. So those are the good things of the deck. And it felt like in relatively fair matchups where we were fighting other creature decks. We saw Mardu Tokens, for example. We saw Esper Spirits. In those matchups where we're kind of playing the creature game and both decks are fighting fairly, we actually just have the power to go over the top of a lot of other decks. So I imagine, barring the nightmare scenario of getting all our mana wiped away by artifact destruction, I think we can really fight with fair decks really well. As far as unfair decks, that's where things are a lot more sketchy. It felt like we just didn't have a chance against the Storm deck, so it's just, in those matchups, I couldn't imagine like Ad Nauseam, stuff like that. We just don't really have good answers. We're basically crossing our fingers for Leyline and just hoping that that's good enough, and most of those decks are built so at least after sideboarding they can deal with the Leyline. It's not just game over against them. The other thing is against unfair creature decks. Think of Death Shadow aggro, for example. Even fast Zoo decks or burn decks, we don't have a lot of instant speed interaction, so if decks are looking to combo kill us with Become Immense and Double Strike and stuff like that, our removals, Journey to Nowhere, Oblivion Ring, stuff that's at sorcery speed, we don't even have Path to Exile in the main deck, so I think that's my biggest concern. So I think it really depends, with this form of the deck, it really depends on your local meta. If you're expecting to play against a lot of relatively fair creature-y mid-range decks, this deck is actually really, really strong. It just goes over the top of all those other decks, doesn't care about Tarmogoyfs and Kalidases and all that stuff. We just go over the top of that, and our stuff is more powerful, and we can tutor up whatever we need thanks to Thalia's Lancers. On the other hand, if we're fighting unfair decks, we just really don't have much game. But I think that that could be somewhat fixable. White does have awesome sideboard cards, so there might be a way to stay alive. Spell-based combo is going to be tricky. Not exactly sure what we do there. We could splash blue for some counter spells in the sideboard, maybe. As far as creature-based combo, Death Shadow, Infect, stuff like that, it would be pretty easy to play Path to Exile in the main deck. I'm not exactly sure. I think we can cut the Ulamog. Ulamog is just a little too much. Also, Brimaz is actually not as exciting as you'd think because it's a one-of, so it's mostly a tutor target, and there were very few situations where we actively wanted to tutor up a Brimaz. Maybe that. Karn, the second Elspeth. So I think if we trim a little bit, maybe we can get some more instant speed interaction, like Path to Exile into the main deck. We could also reconfigure the removal a bit, maybe go down to 2 Journey Nowheres, go down to 1 Mastery of the Unseen. So I think doing stuff like that could give us more game against Infect and blue-red Prowess, and decks like that that are looking to kind of combo kill us with creatures, and we just don't have much for right now. So I think that would be my main suggestion, would be to find a way to get Path into the main deck. Yes, it's going to hurt the Devotion plan a little bit because we're going to lose some white mana symbols, most likely. Although if we start with the Ulamog, for example, we're not actually losing white mana symbols. That would be my main idea. Anyway, that's been our Much Brew About Nothing for this week. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the videos, and I will talk to you soon.